There's nothing quite like the excitement of a slate of video game announcements. The practice that has spanned years at conventions and expos across the world is now delivered directly to our homes online, and sometimes we're even lucky enough to get multiple streams in the same week. With so much to cover, it's great to have a few friends on deck. My name is TJ Starman, and this is episode 302 of Waiting in the Sky. Today, I'm joined by three friends of mine that any Season 2 audience members will surely recognize. Our own audio producer, Richard, and frequent guests, Aaron and Isaac, took some time to dive into the announcements made in Nintendo's Direct, Sony's State of Play, and Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Showcase, respectively, over the last week. I've heard of Christmas in July, but this was like a mini E3 in September. So stick around for three great conversations coming up next. Okay, so the originators of this form of video game announcement stream, Nintendo, had a Nintendo Direct that also came out during this past week of announcements. And so they not only really started this whole formula, but they also just unloaded a ridiculous amount of content here. So I'm very excited to be joined by the show's audio producer, Richard. And Richard, there's no way we could possibly get into all of the stuff that was covered here and still maintain some sort of reasonable runtime on this episode.
Oh, God, no. I mean, honestly, they just kind of bombarded us with a lot of stuff really quickly. But unless you're a huge fan of RPGs and farming sims, you can pretty much gloss over most of it.
Yeah, definitely a lot of that. And I mean, we'd be lying if we said that audience didn't exist for Nintendo. Clearly it does, and they're catering to it. So good news if that is you. To other people that might not be as interested in that stuff, there's still quite a lot that was dropped in here. And so I think, we could probably just bounce back and forth. It'd be hard to, stick to a specific order here. So I think we'll just kind of take turns. I'll bring one up, you bring one up, and we'll kind of go that way. How's that sound?
Yeah, I am down for whatever.
Perfect. So I'll lead with this because it is a big announcement, and they did kind of go towards the end with it. But for me personally, I don't have a history with this series. But that is Pikmin 4 was announced and will be arriving in 2023. So I've actually not played a Pikmin game, but they've only made 4 entries in this series. So it's a series that I definitely have recognized as one that Nintendo fans really like and have really enjoyed. Obviously, they've had representation in Smash Bros. And for a true mainline sequel, number 4, to be coming out next year seems like kind of a big deal.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't played a lot of Pikmin either, but the tiny bit that I did play was pretty fun. And I mean, they have to have some kind of audience if they're up to number 4 already. But honestly, my favorite part of the announcement was just how much Shigeru Miyamoto trolled everyone at the beginning. Because he was like, hey, remember this mobile game that we have? You should play the mobile game. Oh, by the way, Pikmin 4. But you should play the mobile game. But I think it's good that they announced it. It doesn't look like there was a lot to show, mostly just kind of like, hey, here's the game existing, this is how you know we're working on it.
Right.
I mean, as far as announcements go, I think a lot of people will be excited for this. I definitely saw a lot of people excited on Twitter for this.
Yeah, and I think like the highlight was one of the highlights, just for perspective, was you can view the game from the Pikmin's perspective down low to the ground.
Oh God, I think I might have skipped over that. I didn't know that. That's sick.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Now you can possess your Pikmin while it is being eaten by a bigger life form.
Exactly. What was another? Because obviously Nintendo did have their IP on display here. Was there another Nintendo property that jumped out to you?
Like I saw that we're getting some new stuff for Mario Strikers Battle League. I think the inclusion of Pauline's going to be pretty cool. Pauline and Diddy Kong, actually. The little bits of that game I've played, it's extremely fun, but unless you know the controls, you're going to have a bad time. And I don't know the controls, so I always have a bad time. But for people that actually know the controls and have a good time, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm always here for more Diddy Kong in everything. So I think you buried the lead mentioning Pauline first. Personally, Diddy Kong is my boy. Hashtag bring back Diddy Kong Racing. Never gonna happen because of Rare.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah, no, I think that'll be an interesting. It's interesting to see Mario Strikers getting this support like that. Love to see some of those like Mario sports titles getting that additional support from Nintendo and not just seeing them as like a one-off pure cash grab.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice that they're at least trying to keep that alive because I'm not sure how the copyright works there. I mean, does Nintendo technically own the rights to Diddy Kong even though Rare created the character for Donkey Kong Country, or is that just like some sort of weird legal limbo that they've been dealing with?
Oh, there, yeah, I didn't even think about that because that was his debut, was in a Rare created game. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I would imagine that Nintendo probably does have the rights to the character for as much as he's appeared in
Yeah,
Nintendo
definitely.
games since, but there had to have been maybe some sort of a deal that occurred either at the time of Donkey Kong Country's creation or since.
Right. Totally random segue though. How about those new Nintendo 64 games on the online expansion pack? I'm really excited for. It looks like they got Mario Party 1 through 3, Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, and I know the really really big one that everyone was creaming over was GoldenEye.
Yes, yeah, no, it's super exciting because they did bring some heavy hitters from the N64 lineup here. GoldenEye being a huge sort of crown jewel in that lineup, which there's some interesting stuff with Rare being owned by Microsoft now. Apparently, Xbox is also getting a GoldenEye port slash remaster, and apparently it's going to look much better than the
Yep.
virtual console, which is very interesting. But I mean, regardless, it is still cool to see a title that is so beloved by fans make its way to Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Unfortunately, it's going to be absolutely brutally destroyed with the online play because I don't know if you've tried out the Nintendo 64 online play. That is a big no from me at the moment. They have a lot of work to do in order to actually get that properly working. Like, if you enjoy playing the game frame by frame, you're going to love it. But if you don't, you're going to have a bad time.
So we all have that to look forward to. I actually the underrated star of that announced lineup to me is 1080 snowboarding, because what an underrated classic that one is.
Oh, that's a weird way to spell Pilot Wings 64.
I'm struggling with a segue here, but I wanted to make sure we also mentioned Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which looks really cool to me. I didn't play the original, and I have only played a couple of Kirby games. I think I played the Crystal Shards 64, and I played the Forgotten Land recently. But I'm definitely on board for this because it looks beautiful. The art style, the Kirby art style looks great in general, but this also looks like they added a little bit more of a cel shaded look to it. I don't know how that compares to the original release, but it looks great.
Yeah, Return to Dreamland was definitely one of those titles I glossed over even when I had my Wii and played it a lot. So I'm really looking forward to a re-release. I mean, you can never really go wrong with too much Kirby. Sometimes it's kind of the same game, but honestly, it's just good. It's just good old-fashioned platforming fun, and I like it.
That's it. I mean, that's all you need in an endorsement. It's good old fashioned fun, and I like it.
Yeah, then you play Kirby 64 and the final boss is an Eldritch Horror.
Yeah, I mean Kirby. I feel like you never truly know which direction they're going to go with the Kirby universe, because the Forgotten Land, I was playing it and I'm like, this is really cool. And granted, I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with the Kirby universe in general, but then all of a sudden there's this giant gorilla guy and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah, I need to get around to playing the Forgotten Land. I've heard a real lot of really good things about it.
It's definitely worth the time. It's fun. It's very, lighthearted, very Nintendo, very Nintendo Switch. Like the convenience of having it with you was super enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of remakes, though, Tales of Symphonia, that shocked the hell out of me. Out of all the remakes I expected, it was not that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll let you kind of have the stage here with Tales of Symphonia because I know next to nothing, but I do want to say I caught a line there that was something. A character was described as a lumberjack that had lost their emotion due to an experiment.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what that's about because I've actually never played Tales of Symphonia, but back when I had my GameCube, I remember a lot of people talking about it and talking about how good it was. Now, it's a game in the Tales series, so I know there's like Tales of Fantasia, Tales of insert generic kingdom here, but I'm honestly looking forward to it just because it's going to give me a chance to actually play it when I never did, even though it looks like there's a Steam version that's been out since 2016 and I'm literally just now finding out about this. But now I can play it on a Nintendo console the way that it was intended.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And I mean, I can't get past how bizarre that line was, and I was not sure I heard it properly, but I thought it was hilarious. And
Yeah, what'd you say? A lumberjack that lost their emotions in a science experiment?
it was something like that. It was it was ridiculous, and I thought
So,
to myself,
so Wolverine, because I mean, after he got his
"Oh,
adamantium claws, did he lose his emotions? Yes or no?
there
Vote
you
now on your
go,
phones.
there you go." Wolverine confirmed in the Tales of Symphonia remake.
This just goes to show the reach of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Kevin Feige has gone too far officially with this one.
Is that really how his last name is pronounced?
Yeah, have you not been?
No, I thought it was like Phage or something. I've
You
never
thought
heard
he was
anyone
like
say it out loud.
he's a cousin of Paul Feig.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Back on track here, but speaking of universes that have witches in them, cough Scarlet Witch. Bayonetta 3 gets a new trailer. I loved Bayonetta 1 and all of its false endings. I thought the game would truly never end at one point, and then it finally did, and I was like, wow, that was awesome. They made Bayonetta 2 a Wii U exclusive, so I'd missed it the first time around. I bought it when they had it moved over to the Switch, and for whatever reason, life got in the way, and I never played Bayonetta 2. But Bayonetta 3 looks awesome. I love the progression they've had with this character. I think they made a point in the trailer that in the first game, she was fighting for herself. The second game, she was fighting for others. And then they said in Bayonetta 3, she fights for the whole world. And that was an awesome tagline.
I've actually never played any of the Bayonetta games. I know like what you're talking about with the first games ending in Jubileus and like 10 boss fights. But other than that, I don't know anything about the franchise. So just watching the trailer, it looks interesting. I think I think it might be a good point to jump in, but other than that, I really don't know a whole lot about it other than all the people on Twitter going, "Mommy." But I think we can avoid that.
We can definitely avoid that. It does get, I think the value of the game itself gets lost in some of the aesthetic and the response to that aesthetic, because it is kind of a weird thing. Like it's a weird game. There's a weird feel to it overall. I won't lie about that. But there's a lot of value. The gameplay is so smooth and fun. If you are like a big slasher fan, like hack and slash, that's what I'm looking for. Then it's going to be right up your alley. It's a lot of fun, and I think maybe the overall aesthetic to it, where it's just a little off kilter with humor, that might be something that makes or breaks the experience for some people. But I wasn't super big on it when I first started the first game. It kind of caught me off guard, but then I warmed up to it, and it was really charming by the end.
Yeah, the way you describe it, it sounds really fun. And speaking of mommies, Resident Evil Village is actually getting a Switch port now. It looks like that's coming out on the 28th.
I love that. Yeah,
Or sorry, October 28th, not September.
October 28th, so right in the middle of spooky season. It's perfect. I absolutely love this game. Did you have a chance to play it yet, Richard?
I didn't play it, but I really, really, really enjoyed all the memes that came out over the main lady vampire. Like there was this one picture of her like streaming on Twitch, reading the donos and just being really mad. I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, so it definitely got memed to bits, and it's funny because you start off with your interactions with that character very early on in the game, and so you were kind of like riding that wave of meminess to start. But if you are a fan of Resident Evil 7, I think 8 does a really good job of iterating on 7, and also brings in this sort of like medieval flair and definitely some flavor from Resident Evil 4. So if you're a fan of RE4 and you're super excited about the remake, but you want to tide yourself over, and you also in this instance haven't played Resident Evil 8 yet, boom, here it is.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm really not a big fan of is the fact that they are all cloud versions.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to stop doing that because I've always been a very big proponent of physically owning games because in the future, like 20, 30 years in the future, or hell, think about them taking like the Wii Shop channel offline and now they're doing the same thing to the 3DS shop. When all that stuff goes offline, none of that stuff's obtainable anymore unless you just happen to get lucky enough to download it. What's going to happen in 20 to 30 years if someone tries to play these games then? Like, I highly doubt that support's going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because Resident Evil 8 is the first game coming to the console via this cloud version. And it's going to be followed by RE7 and then the remakes of RE2 and 3. So all four of them will be available on the console, but only via cloud, which is sort of the sad reality of a few beloved series like Kingdom Hearts as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot they had to do that with Kingdom Hearts.
Yes, as a tear drips down from my eye, a single lone tear. It's really their loss though, because I could have definitely bought that series once again on not only PlayStation and PC, but also on Nintendo. But I can't. Well, I can, but I won't.
Yeah, you know what you can buy that's by Square Enix though. It looks like a Crisis Core from Final Fantasy VII is actually going to be coming on the Switch. Looks like December 13th. So if you like that, that's there.
I feel like we could just clip that. So if you like that, that's there, and just drop that throughout the podcast in this coming year, because that was great. This is a game that probably a lot of people like myself missed because it was a PSP exclusive originally, and by all accounts, a very widely regarded, greatly regarded game that is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, which obviously a lot of people really love. And this apparently does it justice as a prequel. So to have a very nice looking remastered version here, that the visuals are more in line with the Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy that we are getting, is something that's exciting. And I'll definitely end up playing this one for sure.
Yeah, I think it's great they're making that accessible to people who actually didn't have a PSP back in the day. Speaking of making ports accessible, there's actually going to be a re-release of that same day that they had the direct Radiant Silvergun. Absolutely amazing shoot 'em up if you've never played it. It was a Sega Saturn exclusive, and a lot of people kind of glossed over it because I mean, honestly, a lot of people glossed over the Sega Saturn, but it kind of got some new life after being re-released on Xbox Live Arcade a few years ago, and ever since then they've just been porting it to newer systems. So I'm really glad the Switch is getting a port of it because it is a really, really good game.
Yeah, I missed that one, but definitely sounds interesting. And I feel like Nintendo has been doing. I mean, they've always done this, but they've definitely filled this direct with a lot of games that are becoming available either to Western audiences or becoming available to Nintendo Switch owners that were previously exclusive or hadn't made their way to the console or the region yet. And I think that was definitely a theme I caught on here. And so it's great to see so many of those.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic because God knows they need to put some more stuff on that eShop. I browsed that the other day and it was not pleasant.
Well, that's always been like, people love Nintendo's first party games and their first party software. And that's kind of been like the bread and butter for so long. But at the same time, like there's always been the criticism of Nintendo being able to support third parties to the extent that their competitors do. And I think we've seen more of that over the years. They're still not, in line with what Sony and Microsoft do, but we're inching more and more towards it. And I think a lot of the announcements from this direct kind of coincide with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of Nintendo and third parties, Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope. A lot of people are actually really excited for that. I never got around to playing the first game, but a lot of people actually were pretty happy with the way it turned out. And I know a lot of Super Mario RPG fans are actually really excited for Sparks of Hope because you can actually play as Bowser. Bowser is a playable character in your party again. So they kind of getting a nostalgia kick from that. And a bigger nostalgia kick, they announced Rayman's going to be in the game somehow. I'm not entirely sure how, but I think it's really cool. They're actually making sure Rayman's not completely dead.
Rayman was usurped by his backup singers and was just completely forgotten, but not on Mario's watch.
Basically, that's exactly how it happened.
Yeah, it's funny because I just watched Minions: The Rise of Gru, and it reminded me how Rayman is just Gru and the Rabbids are the minions.
That is the most cursed comparison, but also one of the most accurate.
It really is, and you don't even have to think hard about it. It's just very accurate, and so accept it as truth as we now move on. I think a lot of people, RPG fans for sure. I know there's a lot of them, but we'll touch on, I think, a big announcement here, and that's Octopath Traveler 2, which is coming out February of next year. So it's right around the corner. This is another game that just looks beautiful in this 2D HD art style. I have played just a little bit of Live Alive. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I'm pretty sure it's Live Alive.
That makes sense to me. So I've played a little bit of Live Alive so far, and that's another one. It's a remaster, but it looks beautiful like that. And so Octopath Traveler and what was it? Triangle Strategy, whatever the other one was. Those games that were built, from the ground up in this style they're just so gorgeous. And I never got around to playing Octopath Traveler, but I imagine if you were a fan of the first one, that this is something that really got you excited.
Yeah, honestly, I am really, really glad that Square is fully embracing the HD 2D engine because I played a little bit of the first Octopath Traveler. It was fantastic. I've been playing Live Alive. It is absolutely great. I just beat the future chapter with the robot cube. Oh man, it is amazing. And it's amazing just the attention to detail that they're keeping with keeping things in line with the actual Super Nintendo original. And on top of that, now we're getting Octopath Traveler 2. Like it's a good year to be an RPG fan. It really is.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we can keep this Square Enix train rolling, because one thing that really stood out to me, and I imagine, Richard, that you probably liked this announcement as well, is Final Fantasy, I don't know how to pronounce it, Theorhythm, Final Bar Line. And
the rhythm game?
Yes. And I just, the sheer amount of songs that they talked about being available in this game was just staggering. Like so many songs from the Final Fantasy series, but then they're like, but wait, there's more. They dropped that, and you're getting Live Alive was mentioned. You're getting, I think, Octopath Traveler may have been mentioned, but a lot of the other Square Enix properties, Nier was another one. All three of those franchises were confirmed to. I think it might be post-launch content, but regardless, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that about 99% of it's going to be post-launch content, and I hope it's just not behind like a super expensive paywall, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
they'll just like go iTunes and be like 99 cents per song.
Yeah, hopefully not, because that would be a very quick way to ruin what I think looks like a fun game to have. I totally see this as like just that killing time sort of game when you have your Switch with you, and you just
Oh,
spend a
what
little
are you
bit of time
talking
with it.
about? Obviously, there's a hardcore competitive scene for Final Fantasy Theatrhythm Final Bar Line.
Well, I don't doubt that there is, but for me personally, that's what it'll be. It'll be, it got a little bit of downtime. Let me listen to, instead of going to Spotify and throwing on a Final Fantasy playlist, I can be a little bit more involved in my music. And
Yeah.
also, I guess, not playing a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Anyway, with that awkwardness out of the way, any last big personal titles that you're excited for, Rich?
Oh, Tunic. We're getting a Tunic Switch port, and I about had a heart attack out of happiness when I saw that, because they announced a while ago they were going to be doing it for PlayStation, and then just out of nowhere they're just like, "Oh yeah, by the way, Tunic at the end of the month." And I was just kind of like, "Ah." Like I cannot tell you how happy I was. I was so happy I literally went out and bought the game on Steam so I could play it again. I mean, I'm not going to buy it on. I'm actually kind of curious how it's going to run on the Switch, because there's a lot of like really cool shader effects and everything that they throw in there,
Mhm.
but it's also very low poly. So maybe they have the room to actually do all those crazy shader effects because everything is low poly. But I'm really interested to see how it's actually going to run. I'm really interested to see if they've added anything new to any of the puzzles that are in the game, because there's a lot of them. And I'm just excited because it's, if you haven't played Tunic, go play Tunic. It's an amazing game. It's the playability of The Legend of Zelda with the combat of Dark Souls and the puzzle of Fez. There's literally a lot to love there.
Yeah, it sounds like Frankenstein's video game, but very, very highly regarded across the board. So I'm excited to see that being more accessible too. We've pretty much hit on a lot of the main highlights of this stream, Richard. But I think it's time we get to the biggest, most exciting announcement from this.
Oh,
And
I think I know where you're going with this. It's that Fist of the North Star boxing game, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's the Fist of the North Star. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. So I'm so sorry, people, that we faked you out like that. That was Richard's idea to fake you out. I'm going to talk about the actual big announcement, and that is Just Dance 2023 edition coming to Nintendo Switch.
You son of a bitch.
Oh,
How
we did it.
dare you?
We did it twice. They weren't expecting it a second time.
I wasn't expecting it a second time. I've been bamboozled.
Let's talk about Zelda.
Thank you.
Okay, so The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 was canceled, and instead they're making this The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
I'm
Just
done.
kidding.
Goodbye.
It's
I'm disconnecting right now.
okay. Okay, we've memed this enough now. So the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom gets an announcement trailer with a release date announcing May 12th of 2023. And so this is obviously the evolution of what has been referred to as Breath of the Wild 2. It's what we already saw footage of Link up in the clouds doing some dives and all sorts of crazy stuff. We basically get more of that along with this title and release date.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna kind of go against the grain here. I was actually slightly disappointed. And I don't say that lightly, because I've been a very, very long time Zelda fan. But I feel like for the amount of time that we've waited and basically suffered with the smallest amount of footage we have, they could have given us just a little bit more.
Yeah, I actually would agree with you on that. I saw a lot of the reaction. I didn't watch this direct live, but I saw a lot of the reaction. I knew this was coming by the time I actually got around to watching it properly. And I was expecting it to be more substantial. I didn't realize that's all they gave us was this pretty short trailer, the name and the release date, which obviously it's great to have those things and to get excited about them. But as far as the actual game itself, we didn't see too much more than what we've already seen.
Yeah, I was like, here's a mural and this bird thing. Congratulations.
Yep. If you're, I mean, hey, if you're a bird thing fan, then congratulations. This is for you. But
Yeah, and obviously best Zelda ever.
but for everyone else, I think we're left a little bit wanting. One thing I will say is, I think we already knew it, obviously, but I think the game, or what the gameplay footage we did see, really demonstrates that they are stressing verticality in this game. And so I think obviously Breath of the Wild really introduced the free roam idea into the franchise, and then now we're getting this like huge scale. I imagine this is the type of stuff that they wish they could have done with Skyward Sword, and just making this world so huge, not only like vast on the horizon, but also so vertical and so far up into the sky.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it. This is like Skyward Sword on steroids.
Yeah, and I think it made sense. I think a lot of people, especially after we got the first glimpse at this game, drew the parallels to Skyward Sword HD being released on the Switch, and it made sense to kind of tie that in with this game's release, as seeing as it looks like we're not getting Wind Waker or Twilight Princess ports, but that's okay. Wii U owners can laugh at me as I cry.
Just emulate it.
Okay, we're gonna have to cut that one out. Cut that one out. All right, make a note of the time. We're gonna cut that one out. So
There
as I
goes
was
the
saying,
sponsorship.
Richard, I'm gonna buy a Wii U and I'm gonna play not Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD.
Yes, I love buying games. I love buying them the real legal way. Everyone should go do that right now.
Oh boy, yeah. But this game was literally, it was Nintendo's one last thing. And I think it definitely accomplished its goal of hyping things up a little bit more, and being in the SEO, being in the zeitgeist. But I thought from the impact that it had, that there would have been more to substantiate. That's the word I'm looking for. Substantiate all of that, and it was just a little bit more of a tease.
Yeah, it really was. It was like sexting a really, really hot Tinder date and they send you a picture of their big toe.
So we've got that image now. But yeah, Richard, was it, just to cover our bases here, was there anything that we didn't get to that we'd be remiss to not bring up now?
Let's see. Well, I mean, there's Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life. It's just a remake of Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life. Fae Farm, whatever that is. Rune Factory 3, whatever that is. Factorio, whatever that is. Like, honestly, it's just kind of a lot of ports more than anything.
Fatal Frame was another.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
That stood out to me. But yeah, in general, this was a big win for farming simulator fans.
Yeah, if you like farming, oh man, this is the direct for you.
If you liked any of these games, then this podcast is for you. The rest of this podcast is for you. So stick around and we will touch base on some of the announcements from Ubisoft and Sony in the streams that they put out this past week. But thanks for hopping on in front of the mic, Richard. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to join me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone go buy Tunic when it comes out or I'll find you.
He's not even kidding. He will find you. All right. So joining me to talk about Sony's State of Play is Aaron Winston, who has been on the show a number of times. I would list them all off, but that would be the entire runtime of this segment, to be honest. But always talking video games, movies, and video game movies with me. Thank you for being here, Aaron. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing wonderful. Yeah, happy to be here as always.
Well, your name definitely popped into my head when I was looking at these streams and some of the announcements. Uh, in particular, with the connection with PlayStation here, because you actually gave me a heads up about one of these announcements, and that is Tekken 8. They led the show off with this announcement with a trailer, and it's a perfect place for us to start as well. But Aaron, as the resident fighting game aficionado in my life, what
So
was your
honored,
reaction
so
on
honored.
Tekken 8?
Thank you so much. Yeah, you know, y'all, I have been playing Tekken my entire life. As many people my age, I'm a couple years from 30, so my first Tekken was, Tekken 3, Tekken 2, around that era. Mainly 3. So I've ever since 3, I have had every Tekken around launch time. If I didn't get it at launch, I may have gotten it, for Christmas or just, a couple months after it came out. I love this series. It's one of my top 5 series of all time. So to be here for number 8 is a blessing, like happy to it's things that make you want to stay. Have you ever had something that makes you just want to stay safe? Like, let me just try to stay alive for this shit. Like
It's a
that's what
comfort zone.
yeah, right. It's like, okay, I have a reason. Now, I'm not saying video games are my reason to live. I'm just saying, like, things like that though. Tekken 8, like, I wanna see this shit. So, I'm gonna be careful when I'm driving and look both ways across the street. If some drama's happening, I'm walking away before the shots ring out. Like, yes, I want to be here to see this shit launch. Yes, I'm very excited. And what actually has me the most curious is because one pattern I've noticed with Tekken throughout the entire series is that it's odd numbered installments that are like the big hitters, because those
Mhm.
usually always come after they try to push themselves into a new medium with Tekken. As far
Right.
as in the early days, it was the graphical, and well, it's always had graphical enhancements. Oh my gosh, if we all saw that trailer, like, whoa. But in the early days, it was, developing more combos and speed for the characters, in which Tekken 1 and 2 kind of play as its blueprint, with Tekken 2 being way more of an expansive version and faster version of the first one, and 3 being like the perfect formula for 90s 3D fighting games. Um and so but what happens is that, especially after 3, I mean, you can argue this with Tekken 2, was just how, like, much Tekken 3 just perfected the formula of and the system and the mechanics that they were developing for the series at the time. But then you get to, like, Tekken 4, and I always just feel like, because Tekken just is a big franchise, sells a bunch of units, big hit, especially like after Tekken 3. Tekken 4 just really went far with how much they reached with newer, gameplay styles, and more specifically what they could do with the environments. But they did so much that it actually hindered the ability to successfully, have this be a tournament fighter, just with just how unfair certain angles could be if you were, like, elevated on a certain platform. So Tekken 5 comes around and brings it back. Tekken 5 is when it felt like, this feels like, at the time, the next great Tekken 3 ish type game. So Tekken 5 was great, and then Tekken 6 comes around, and Tekken 6, being the first of the HD gaming era, it was another example of them reaching and having to, push themselves and experiment. What I always feel is that the odd numbers installments for Tekken are the experiment, the beta, kind of the new blueprint, whereas the odd number installments is like the perfected version of whatever blueprint they laid out for themselves previously. So it actually really has me curious. Will Tekken 8 be will it break this curse? Tekken 4 and 6 are just seen as the weaker installments, whereas 3, 4, and 5, those odd numbers, those are like the trifecta, the perfect Tekkens. Any of those, especially Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, I have to call that one out, because that's the most accessible, and there's an HD port of that as well. So yeah, this I'm not saying, I'm assuming based on history this is going to be a breaker. Like this isn't going to be as good as 7 was, because game developers have learned a lot over the last 10 years. I think they really have it down to where a lot of these past mistakes can be realized and fixed. So I don't know. Tekken 8 could come through and be better than 7. And I would love that. And from what I'm seeing so far, it has that fucking potential. So
Yeah,
that's my second spiel right there, y'all.
that was quite the spiel. This is why you bring Aaron on to talk fighting games, people, because he'll drop all of that on you. For me, here's what I'll add. I think that trailer looked dope. I have great memories of watching Tekken 7 outside of the LA Convention Center when we went to E3 in 2017, and we got to see some esports live. That was a lot of fun, and I hope that this game is awesome. I probably won't end up playing it. So
Be pretty to look at, though. Well, I'll play it in front
it
of you.
is. It is.
I'll stream it or
That
something.
sounds like a good compromise. So PlayStation also kind of sprinkled in some smaller announcements, or at least in my opinion, some smaller things, some things that didn't really catch my attention as much. One of those is we got kind of another look at PlayStation VR 2, which looks like they're bringing out the heavy hitters with a Star Wars game, and then Demio, I believe, which is supposed to be very tabletop RPG-esque. So any thoughts on those, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, I was really more excited that VR2 was announced because, so many of us just looked at the VR headset for the PS4 era as something experimental. We appreciated it. We all had that one friend that had it, but it just didn't get all of us PS4 owners to just want to go out and grab it. But I'm happy it sold enough that they did another headset, because that's actually what so many of us said. We were like, we're sure the next time they do this, it's gonna be popping. It's gonna be like perfect. It's gonna be, not perfect, but it's gonna be better than what they got going on right now.
Which I would be on board with that. I think VR is still in kind of the iterative process here. And, I think there's a price barrier with, the equipment that you have to purchase to be able to do this. There's exclusivity concerns that I have, which, like what games are solely available on PC? What games can you play only on PlayStation? So there's a lot of things that need to kind of work out in the VR segment of the industry here, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of like in the category of, oh, that's cool, I'm happy for you, but I'm not interested. That's where it's at for me. I think a couple other things fell into that category for me personally. I think Like a Dragon Ishin, which is making its Western debut, with, I guess now we're totally abandoning the Yakuza name for this series. I think that looks cool. I don't know if I'll get around to it, but looks cool. And another one is this Synduality from Bandai Namco, which is one of the PlayStation console exclusives. Totally not my thing, but looks cool. I hope it's awesome and that people really enjoy it. If you're a fan of something like maybe Nier, that it might be up your alley, but
Yeah.
not something that really struck me. Any of those catch your eye?
Well, Like a Dragon more than Synduality. But that's just because it's my type of game. But I also wasn't, I kind of just thought these two announcements were just okay. And I don't know, maybe I'll have to look more into Synduality, but I don't know. I'm still working through my gauge on the anime aesthetic. Um, yeah, I mean, definitely not the time to go into all my thoughts on anime right now, but it kind of gave me a lot of that, like kind of, well, I see if you're into characters like this, who talk like this, act like this, and or this way, talk this way, act this way, I see where sensuality is a game for you, but I don't know, it just the way it just kind of went, I was like, there's a lot of games with this similar aesthetic that honestly look
Mhm.
better. And yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get to that soon. So yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think I see what you're doing there with setting me up for a perfect segue. But I think the other thing is the trope of uh, like mechs and anime girls is not a thing that I personally am really into, and
You
this is
basically
definitely
said it for
that.
me.
And I know there's a ton of people that love that, the diva stands out there, but it's not me. But again, hope it's great and hope you all can enjoy. One thing I am excited about, speaking of this sort of anime aesthetic, is Stellar Blade, which was revealed as another PlayStation console exclusive. You may have heard about this as Project Eve. It was, I guess, teased or announced at one point under that code name. And I don't have a whole lot as far as what I expect of this game, but I can tell you that this trailer, it looked amazing, and I was a little thrown off by some of the voice acting, because I think a lot of it was voiceover over, and so the voice acting, which was kind of anime-esque, was throwing me with what was on the screen at the time without seeing a character actually speaking. But then once we actually saw the characters, it made more sense. It was more cohesive. And I am very excited to be seeing some more of this one.
Absolutely. Project Eve was one of my highlights for the not E3 of the June announcements. And I'm happy that they brought it around because there was just so many games announced, and we had to have gone through
So
like
many.
200 games.
And we didn't even go through all of them. We skipped so
No,
many.
just like seriously, it was crazy. But happy that there's a lot of options out there. I just hope developers get their coins, because with all the we can only focus on so much at once. So it's like,
Mhm.
hope y'all release it a good time. But no, I'm happy that Project Eve has come back, and it seems like this is something that PlayStation is really going to push.
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that attracts me to Stellar Blade is how PlayStation 2 it makes me feel. I remember so many games kind of having this type of anime, but like, pushing the envelope and being very expansive and giving you just crazy imagery that you don't forget, and creatures you don't forget, and just so much variety. I just feel like, especially when you think of like the Final Fantasy installments of the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era, and then just so many of the JRPGs of that time. So that's Stellar Blade gave me those feels, because there's times where I feel PlayStation can get lost in a certain aesthetic and kind of get kind of stuck there. More specifically, the big brooding guy with a machine with a gun, machine gun, like,
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, y'all do this shit a lot now, and I'm not going, get social with it, but it's like a lot of times it's also like a very Americanized guy. Like, there's a lot of people in this world now, but so yeah, Stellar Blade Gate crossed a lot of boxes that also that it's important for me as a gamer visually. The cinematography looks amazing. The storyline looks great. And I can see, even the music of the trailer, kind of kept me,
Mhm.
vibing with it as well. Um, but yeah, definitely just the logo, the way that they're stylizing this game, it brings me back to the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era. That's what it did for me.
Yeah, which is, it's like pure nostalgia injected into your veins. So it's quite the experience, and I'm glad to hear that you were on the same page and wanting to see more of that. I think another one when we were briefly chatting before recording is Pacific Drive, which looks very sort of ominous and mysterious and also just unique. And I am on board for, whatever direction they end up taking this. I'm here for the ride right now. What about you?
Yeah, honestly, I found Pacific Drive scary. That trailer
Yeah,
actually,
totally.
like, I'm not gonna have nightmares, but like, no, like, just when you look at a situation and you can feel like this feels scary, that is what Pacific Drive gave me. It thrilled me. I really love how apocalyptic the game looked, but non-traditionally. I think people are becoming much more creative with their end of the world scenarios. But with the way the trailer ended, like with that little voice clip, I'm like, oh, is this much more of a domestic situation? Like, these are like all this craziness is happening between people that know each other, and there's a history. And I mean, there was so much curiosity I got from this trailer, and I really, and the visuals stunned me. I love the art style. I didn't know what the hell the threat was. I mean, it's like this looks like some I don't even know. I don't want to put too much on it, but it's just yeah. It gave me, so you played Resident Evil 7, right?
Yes.
So you know how like we pretty much get to where you figure out that, of course, through specific means. And I also didn't play 8, so I don't know if I kind of inferred that 8 answered some questions you had from 7. Don't spoil that. I will get to it soon. um, I'm just saying, the whole like a person having the ability to just control very crazy things. And we see a lot of people experiment with people that have these powers of, blending in different dimensions and different, entities of different dimensions together. Like, yeah, actually, it's safe to say Pacific Drive gave me Wanda Maximoff vibes. Like,
Okay.
I went
Okay.
like, is someone controlling this? Is someone doing this? Is the question that I got from that. So yeah.
Yeah. I see that. I can definitely see that. I like that you picked up on the more sort of ominous nature of it. I also think it just kind of I'm just looking at a screenshot right now, and I almost could see this as like if you can imagine a crossover between like Death Stranding with like how sort of isolated you are, along with something like the Cloverfield universe, where there's this sort of mysterious but incredibly intimidating, threatening presence that you can't quite put your finger on. Like that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this. And
Yes.
on top of that, it takes place in the Pacific Northwest, which is one of my favorite settings in video games and in media in general, to be honest. I am a huge fan of, I really enjoyed Days Gone, which takes place in Oregon. I'm a huge fan of the Life is Strange games, the first two, Life is Strange and Before the Storm, taking place in the Pacific Northwest as well. So that type of setting with that type of vibe is a really interesting recipe, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see some more about this one.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's see, because I'm kind of going across the board here as I'm scrolling through this website. But we were talking. I don't really want to get into it, but I know we were talking before recording, so I'll at least mention it here. Hogwarts Legacy got a trailer. I will say I'm a very big fan of the Harry Potter universe. I really love the books and the movies. For whatever reason, there's a lot of reasons not to be super excited about this game, or to be super excited about Harry Potter stuff in general. But I don't think that this I don't think that the Harry Potter universe particularly lends itself well to video games as a medium. Just from, and it could just be that they haven't cracked the formula to make a good one yet. But I haven't really enjoyed a Harry Potter game that was like a quality game. I enjoyed Harry Potter games when I was a child and didn't understand anything, but I don't have high hopes for this one. And I think it's great if I'm proven wrong, but I probably won't be playing it. We got a couple more heavy hitters here that I want to touch on at least. The first being Rise of the Ronin, which I believe this was the debut announcement for this one. It's an open world samurai game from Team Ninja, who are the creators of Neo. This is expected to release in 2024, so a couple years away still. But looks great for what we got here in this trailer. Obviously, a lot of time for things to unfold between now and release, but I'm pretty on board for this. I know you had mentioned you need to get into some of these Japan set games, and I actually need to do the same, both for this and then the new Assassin's Creed as well.
Yeah, definitely. Oh wait, what about Assassin's Creed? Before I go on my point, I'm curious.
Did I just drop a bomb on you? So
you probably did.
You'll hear all about it when you listen to this episode. But Assassin's Creed Codename Red was announced by Ubisoft, which is going to be set in feudal Japan. Wow. For the listener's sake, I'll leave it at that. But we can talk more off recording.
But as far as Rise of the Ronin, this game looked exquisite. I thought this was my second favorite trailer after Stellar Blade, and it wasn't too far off from my from first place. Like it's kind, I wouldn't say it's neck and neck, but it's pretty damn close. Like definitely have the most hype for Stellar Blade out of all of these trailers. I mean, of course there's Tekken 8, but again, Tekken 8 was just a still sample. But Rise of the Ronin, yeah, I loved how cryptic this trailer was. I loved how dark it was. I don't know. I just can't help it. I'm a sucker for a dark samurai story because they can be some of the most enthralling and introspective stories that you encounter. I'm a fan of those films, Lady Snowblood and all that. So I'm cool with these PlayStation or these current gen samurai games. I think this is a great time to realize that formula, just with the amount of detail and action you can put in a character. But yeah, I'm really down for just how realized that they're getting these samurai stories. And yeah, like I said, this game also looks like it's gonna bring the drama. It's gonna be a dark one here. So
yeah, and I'm here for it. I think that PlayStation has always shown a willingness to embrace some of these, moody, deep stories on their exclusives, and I've really enjoyed their track record with such games, and that's actually a great segue, if I do say so myself, into our final topic here. They ended the stream with a God of War Ragnarok trailer, a brand new trailer. Actually, right before the brand new trailer, they did release this look at a pretty cool limited edition DualSense controller. And then got into the trailer itself. But I know you and I are both fans of that controller.
Oh, it was beauty. I mean, I don't have a PS5 to get it on, but just with the way that everyone's FOMO just enables the scalpers, I've kind of given up on beautiful console thing.
It's totally just it's great if you have the means to have this additional item, but by no means is this a necessity. And right. I mean, I'm not going to end up getting that controller, but it is cool to look at. PSAs about being responsible with your money aside. God of War Ragnarok. So I think this is a game that didn't need really to be hyped anymore. I think it was going to sell amazingly regardless, but they did give us a cool trailer just kind of showing the intensity of this story. And I am very intrigued by this clash of worlds of I think they kind of sold us on the idea of Kratos being a Greek god clashing with the gods of Norse mythology in the first game, but we really didn't see a whole lot of that. We got obviously multiple fights with different enemies that were gods or demigods, but I think the scale that a lot of us were really expecting or hoping for is what Ragnarok is setting up for. And there's like a line where someone said called him a pretend god or something like that, and then there's the voiceover where they're asking him rhetorically, what god are you? Have you ever been prayed to or praised or honored or something along those lines?
Yeah.
And that was extremely powerful to me. And so I'm very interested in seeing where they take Kratos and where they take deep voiced Loki. Oh. And I think I'm on board. I already was, but this added fuel to the fire for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes it really does take a good story trailer to sell something for you. And I will definitely say that, God of War is a series that I loved back on the PS2. And I, over the years, made sure I played. I actually got the God of War HD collection for the PS2. That was actually a really good disc. It was just an HD version of 1 and 2. I believe they did release an entire collection that had every single game up into God of War 3 included on a PS3 disc. So you got them in nice, if it was on the PS2, you got it on a nice HD remaster. But this newer God of War has taken me a little more effort for me to completely get into. However, it doesn't mean all I had to do was play the game though, and then and a lot of that went away. The first game I haven't finished, but I played a lot of it. Not a lot of it, but a few hours of it, and it's definitely a great game. I enjoyed watching people play it, and this trailer definitely sold me on making sure that this was something that I definitely pick up when I do get a PS5, hopefully this holiday season or something like that. So yeah, not all the times I'm crazy about, trailers that are going to show a whole bunch of stuff, but for this game, it definitely helped me realize how well made it's going to be. I mean, some of those visuals I can pull up in my brain right now, and they're still mind blowing to me. I didn't even know what the hell was going on in some of that trailer. It was that trippy. So, you got me sold. when if for the world's reference, when Aaron is tripped out, he's happy.
And on that note, that was Sony's State of Play in September of 2022. So this was it was a short and sweet presentation that we managed to, I think, just about double as far as commentary goes in runtime. But definitely some highlights there. Some interesting storylines to track. I didn't even mention how PlayStation is apparently doing NFTs now with PlayStation Stars, but that's also a thing, I guess. And so it's a lot, obviously, as things always heat up at this part of the year as far as releases go. But we are seeing a few games get announced as well, which is always exciting. But Aaron, thank you so much for joining me to talk through this State of Play. I always appreciate when you can make the time to join me. And we'll definitely have to link up again for whatever it is down the line. I'll already have you penciled in for a Tekken 8 discussion.
All right. Yeah, man. Just hit me up whenever. I love to be here, and thank you all for listening and having me on again.
All right, man. Well, thank you. We'll see you soon.
All right. Y'all have a fantastic week. Take care of yourselves.
All right. So I am excited to be joined by a familiar voice here for a conversation about Assassin's Creed. So if you didn't know, this is the 15-year anniversary of the Assassin's Creed franchise. And to celebrate, Ubisoft gave us an Ubisoft Forward that was essentially all Assassin's Creed, because the couple of things that they led with were not the most exciting things in the world, and everyone was there for the big Assassin's Creed announcements. One such person is Isaac, aka InfernalGriffin, on Twitch, on YouTube, all across the internets. And Isaac, what was just kind of your gut reaction to this press conference, this stream? I don't know what we're calling these anymore, but first off, welcome. And what was your gut reaction just overall before we get into the details?
Well, first, thank you for having me back, TJ. And honestly, there was part of it that I was excited for, part of it I was intrigued for, and then other parts are just like, wait, what? 'Cause it seems like that you turned on a couple of things, but you know, that's kind of how development goes these days.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And it's been that way, it seems like, for quite a while, but especially, post-COVID world, where you're seeing a lot of changes that were decided on like 2-3 years ago. And we're just seeing how delayed things are because of that, and just because of the way that the industry cycles. It takes a little bit of time to actually see those things come to fruition. So Isaac, in the past, you've been on a few episodes now. We've talked about Batman, we've talked about Spider-Man, talked about E3, and we of course talked about the Assassin's Creed franchise as a whole. So it was great to be able to have you come back to talk about Assassin's Creed. But I actually think that your background in guest spots on this podcast is very fitting, because this was like this weird sort of E3 announcement / Ubisoft kind of did the whole Marvel thing where they put up a bunch of logos on the screen and people got excited and lost their minds. But, you forget that we didn't actually learn anything.
Yeah, there really wasn't much learned other than a couple of titles, a couple of locations, kind of a U-turn on how Infinity was going to work, which honestly I don't mind. But there really wasn't a lot of information gained. They didn't spoil a lot, which is good for them, at least. It keeps the hype up, but it's just an enigma surrounded by a mystery.
Absolutely. So let's talk with the more tangible things first. Let's kind of take the same approach that they did here. And a game that we actually have confirmation is coming is Assassin's Creed Mirage. And I know you and I were talking just before we hit record here about the origins, the Assassin's Creed origins of this game. And so for those of you who don't know, this was originally planned to be a Assassin's Creed Valhalla expansion. It features, I'm not familiar with the character because I still have not played Valhalla, but it features a character from that game. And it's the idea is that it's going to be more stealth focused. It's going to be much more in the vein of your classic Assassin's Creed games, sort of 1 through 3 or 1 through Black Flag even, as opposed to the more modern RPG the elements that are in the recent games. So what was your take on Assassin's Creed Mirage and what we learned there?
Well, it's interesting because you pointed out that it was originally slated to be an expansion. I don't necessarily pay as close attention, but that was a bit of a shock to me to learn. But at the same time, it makes sense for it to have originally been an expansion, and then they're just like, you know what, this character could use some fleshing out. We could actually probably make a decent game out of this. And the fact that they're bringing back the old school style, I think, to try and more or less bridge the gap between the more modern RPG open world types who loved Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla with all the people who loved the classics from Assassin's Creed through, say, Black Flag, or even, you could even argue all the way up to Syndicate, that was all very similar to a very stealth, linear, story-focused game. It's a nice little addition, and Basim's story, I think, is going to be it's something I was curious about. I was wondering if they would do an expansion over it, but the fact they're going to do a full game over it is a little surprising, but it's got me intrigued, and I'm kind of looking forward to it, even though it's not going to be out for probably till about this time next year.
Yeah, I don't think they gave us an exact release date. I'm just seeing 2023 here on the article that I'm referencing. But I am excited about this. I had tweeted at you before the stream that I was hoping to see an Assassin's Creed remake announced. We talked about how dated that game has become since it's released 15 years ago, and it's by far the most outdated game in the series. And while we didn't get a true remake of Altair's story, we are getting a Baghdad set game in Assassin's Creed Mirage here with Basim's story, and I'm on board with that. I think it kind of scratches the itch that I had to get back to the basics and the core of Assassin's Creed, and it seems like that's kind of what Ubisoft was going for here. And I also heard rumblings that this is not going to be a full price game as well, so maybe it's getting the sort of Uncharted Lost Legacy treatment here. And if that's the case, I'm totally cool with it.
You could also argue it's getting I believe Assassin's Creed Rogue was kind of the same way. It wasn't the full price when it was released. It was probably going to be, I think, just like Assassin's Creed Rogue. I think Rogue was supposed to be just like Freedom Cry, a big expansion off of Freedom Cry and then off of Assassin's Creed 4, but they ended up making a whole game out of it, or a spin-off of 3 or what have you. But it's kind of doing the same thing here, I think, with Mirage. I think a non-full price game, if that ends up being the case, depending on how much content there is, I think it makes a lot of sense. And just based on the familiarity we already have with the character, it wouldn't be too much of a shock to me if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the meat of a lot of this stream, and so I think that's going to be the meat of a lot of our conversation as well. But there were quite a bit of things at least announced here. Next on the docket is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the last chapter. So Isaac, I know when we were last talking about AC, I think you were making your way through the Valhalla DLC still at that time. Did you end up finishing? Is it Dawn of Ragnarok, the last one?
Yes, that was the most recent. It is done. I've been done with that for a little while here since we last talked, but the last chapter, from how I understand, and for those that haven't played Valhalla, when you start in the game, you start actually next to, just like the other two games, you're not using the main character in the real world's DNA to find the character that you're portraying. You're finding something that's attached to them and somehow. For example, in Origins, it was Bayek and Aya's bodies. In Odyssey, it was a broken piece of the Spear Leonidas and the notes of Herodotus. And in Valhalla, they found Eivor's body. So it was, oddly enough, in the States somewhere in the Northeast, from where I could tell, based on kind of like the geography and kind of how they played it out. So I think this new DLC is basically going to tell us the final chapter of Eivor's story, where he or she, depending on how you decided to portray them, breaks off from Ravensthorpe and travels across the ocean to somewhere up there in the Northeast, or maybe even southern Canada, and ended up being there.
That's interesting. So like I said, I still haven't gotten started in Valhalla. I have played a good amount of Odyssey since we had last recorded that episode. But so I don't have a whole lot of personal insight to add here. But Isaac, I guess the question I would have is, are you excited about, one, there being more Valhalla content, and two, are you ready to conclude that story?
I'll start with at least the first question. I'm kind of torn on it, really, if I'm ready for it or not, because it's kind of just like, they've done so much with it already. They have poured so much time and so much effort and so much resources into Valhalla. It's absolutely nuts. But it's just like, it's a story that could be told, but at the same time, I just don't feel that it's necessary. Am I going to play it? Yes, you bet. Who knows what's going to happen? So you bet your backsides I'm going to play it and figure it out. But I'm not it's not something I'm necessarily chomping at the bit for. Am I excited to see the story end? Well, I basically thought it was, if they were going to do another expansion, it was going to be more of the dreamscape, quote unquote, where you're portrayed in Odin as like those old memories or the mythos of Norse mythology. That's where I thought they would go with it. I would have been excited for that.
Mm-hmm.
But this more kind of just this seems like something that they could have built in and just had a time gate around the code or something, if that's even possible, to kind of end the series with. But I'll still play it. I'm looking forward to it, but it's just not something I'm chomping at the bit for.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the fan base had a similar feeling about this announcement. It seemed like they were kind of framing it as a like all questions will be answered sort of thing. Like this will absolutely conclude and wrap up Eivor's story, and that at least sounds kind of satisfying to me. But again, I've also not really had that full experience of playing through that game, so I can't speak to it too much personally. I want to move us on a little bit, though, because we got just a tiny little tease of something else from Assassin's Creed, and that is the Assassin's Creed Netflix series was confirmed to be in early development. So probably a year out from that, at least. Had you heard any rumblings about this? Is this something that you're interested in at all?
I hadn't heard any rumblings. I am interested, nervous, because the last time they tried to do something in terms of film with it, it turned out not as good as hoped and not as good as anticipated. The video games into movies curse continued. But I think a Netflix series would be a lot better for this if they're going to try and adapt it. So I think they've got a shot. Am I holding my breath? No. Am I going to check it out? You betcha.
Yeah, I agree with that. I fell asleep during the Assassin's Creed movie. Aaron, who's also on this episode of the podcast, can attest to that. I was a huge Assassin's Creed fan going into that movie. I was very excited that they finally did this because it just seemed so ripe for a live action adaptation because it seemed so grounded, at least at that point in the franchise's story. And I think I'm excited to see what they do here. But, for a Netflix series, I think the best case scenario we've seen for a video game property in live action is The Witcher. And I think the worst case scenario you could argue is maybe the Resident Evil series we just got, where but again, this is Resident Evil. They like to kind of branch out and try and differentiate things in a new way, but they just went super weird with it. They tried a little too hard and a little too much, if you ask me. And you just don't know what you're going to get with a series or even just a live action adaptation of video games at all. So I know Netflix has done really well with especially some animated series. Castlevania jumps out, but I don't know that they have quite the proven track record to this point that makes me feel confident. So we're just kind of waiting to see. One interesting bit is, I guess, the showrunner is the writer of Die Hard and The Fugitive. So interesting.
That is extremely interesting, actually. I mean, if there's someone who's going to know how to probably dial up some action and some stealth, it's definitely going to be that guy. Just based on my knowledge of Die Hard and The Fugitive, those are two outstanding films. But yeah, you kind of mentioned the video game adaptations. Now, Witcher, I'd kind of do as a bit more of a hybrid adaptation, since both the game and the show are both based on a book series, which I'm reading through right now. I love Andrzej Sapkowski's work. I love how the stories are built from the books. So you also had that going for The Witcher. You didn't have just games to pull from. You had a little bit more lore there. And then I would agree with the Resident Evil. It was what's the word I'm looking for? I guess I'll go with daring interpretation.
You're too kind.
Yeah, I'm trying to be kind. And then it ended up tripping, falling on its face, rolling down a hill into a dumpster that got lit on fire.
All right, there you go. There we go.
I had to set it up, but it and the films for Resident Evil had been kind of hit and miss too, but they weren't god awful, at least by most people's standards. So
Yeah.
it's the opportunity is there. I think Ubisoft as a whole has built a lot of lore, and since it pulls a lot from history and historical record, there's a lot there you can work with. It's just I'm not sure how they're going to work with it. Are they going to do a new original character? Are they actually going to do it based on the games? I'm curious to see which direction they go with it. But like I said, I'm not holding my breath for something spectacular because a lot of the stuff recently has just kind of fallen flat.
Yeah, I think one interesting piece to see is Assassin's Creed has really shifted since that movie was released. At the time, we were still very much in the sort of present day, going back into the ancestors storyline era of Assassin's Creed. And while there are still some present day elements, like you mentioned, in the recent games in Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, they much more focus on the actual characters in the past. And so is there going to be any kind of modern era element to this show? You would think that there probably will be, but like how much weight and how much stock are they going to put into that side of things versus the historical elements will be interesting to see.
Indeed. It's just unfortunately with a lot of this stuff, it's just kind of wait and see. And if you want to get your hopes up, go ahead. I personally am not, just because of, video games into film of any kind history. So
yeah, it does not have a great track record. But I think this is a really fun announcement that they gave us, and that is Assassin's Creed Fire Red and Leaf Green.
I see what you did there. Yes, the locale that people have been screaming for since probably 2014, realistically, on where they should go with the series in feudal Japan. I am excited to see it. Oh man, I'm actually kind of excited. I can't wait to explore feudal Japan. If there's one thing from this thing I'm hyped for, it is that. It is the finally.
Yeah. So I make that joke because what we actually got was code names. Yeah. We got Assassin's Creed Codename Jade, which we don't really need to get into because this is a mobile game. Yes, the bigger story here was what you were alluding to, Codename Red, which is the Assassin's Creed game set in Japan. And I also made a comment about this that, this was rumored for so long, and I think people really wanted this setting for the longest time. And I made the comment that it only took Sekiro and Ghost of Tsushima to release for Assassin's Creed to finally bite the bullet here and be like, hey, I guess this actually is a viable setting and worth our time.
Yeah, well, at least from the idea of Ghost of Tsushima, because that's probably going to be more in the vein of how it's going to be portrayed. Now it's going to obviously have the Assassin's Creed twist on it. It's not going to be how Ghost of Tsushima is, but yeah, it baffles me that we've been like, dude, feudal Japan for the better part of a decade, and they don't get it, and then it's just like, oh, two other AAA titles have had massive success on doing the same thing. Oh, why didn't we jump on it first? This seems a lot like buyer's remorse, or at least seller's remorse, of why didn't we jump on this sooner? And
maybe
now, but from the consumer angle of it, it's just like about damn time. We are ready. We are waiting. Let's go. But we'll kind of see how that goes, and then obviously we still have at least one more code name to go through too.
Yes, it's a great segue into Assassin's Creed Codename Hex, which. This was, I guess we got as much of this as the other teasers, which is to say, like 20-second clip. And this one was just a bundle of twigs hanging from a tree in the woods, tied up to look like the Assassin's Creed logo, which is very cool. I love the aesthetic here, which is good because that's all we're getting from this teaser. And we don't really know more about this other than it's apparently gonna have some sort of Wiccan element associated with it. I'm totally blanking on what the actual like setting is. I don't know if we got anything about the actual setting as far as time and place.
I don't know so much about place, but I've had to ballpark it in terms of time. I think they could actually use a lot of different time frames. They could go back Middle Ages. They could do the 16th and 17th century. There's a lot of opportunity there. Part of me thinks it was loosely based maybe on the Salem witch trials, but I don't know.
Yeah, that seems like that would be. I mean, I think it's a viable time frame. We've seen Assassin's Creed 3, which would be roughly around that time. So I guess
about 100 years after, it would have been 3. So I mean, you've still got. I mean, because the heart of the Salem witch trials, I believe, was roughly 1620. I think. So if you wanted to go late 16th century into the early 17th century with something like that, I think you could do it.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see what details we get about this in the coming years, because I think that is one of the more exciting pieces of what was announced in this press conference. And that, along with Codename Red, seem to be their like long-term big tent poles as we move forward. But what those tent poles will be holding up, Isaac, does appear to be Assassin's Creed Infinity, which you mentioned earlier. Do you want to kind of just give a brief explanation of what this is?
Well, originally, when they had announced it, it sounded like they were going to go with a big MMO title set across history with Assassin's Creed kind of tied to it. They've done what I think is a bit of a U-turn with it, and I think for the better, in that it's more going to be more or less like a social hub, from what I understand, that kind of links everything together. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I'm not sure how they're going to approach it with that, but it has a unique concept in that I don't think many other games have kind of like a centralized hub other than a website. So this might be something that could be based on a console. It could be based on a PC through like an app or something. So it's an interesting little take, an interesting little spin from something that we originally thought was going to just be like this massive MMO to something that's going to be more of like a hub for probably information. And who knows, it could be something that turns into something else. I don't know.
Yeah, to me, the vibe I got from watching the stream was that it kind of reminded me of what Call of Duty has now with Warzone, and how Warzone is kind of, it's not exactly like that, but Warzone is attached to the recent Call of Duty entries so that you can play Warzone and also play the whatever copy of whatever game you have. So Vanguard or Modern Warfare, or there was one in between those two that I'm totally blanking on. But you download that game, you also have Warzone, and you're playing with all these players from across the world and across these titles. And so it's very interesting that we see another huge company kind of taking this approach where they're bringing their multiple titles together and tying them in some way, despite them likely being, yearly releases or, every other year releases, where there's at least a good amount of, distance between release dates here.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of what it looks like. And then I also think that it could be, and this is me reaching a little bit, but I don't put it out of the possibility of any developer, maybe this turning into some kind of a subscription service to get access to all the Assassin's Creed games at any point in time. Yeah,
no, that would seem to be a pretty natural progression if they decide to go down that route. So we'll see. But one last thing here, and this is kind of how this was presented as well, as a one last thing, copyright. The quote is from Mark Alexis Cote. They called him Mac on the stream, which I found entertaining. Is that they are investigating how we will bring back standalone multiplayer experiences into the Assassin's Creed universe, all connected to the Infinity Hub. So multiplayer Assassin's Creed could be back on the horizon. Did you ever get into that back in I guess it would have been more of like Brotherhood days?
Yeah, it was like it was really just, I think, Brotherhood Revelations and I think 4, and then it kind of died off. but I never really got into it. I wasn't as big of an achievement hunter then as I am now. Otherwise, I probably would have been. I tried it a time or two, and I wasn't necessarily enthused by it. It just didn't feel like Assassin's Creed. You know what I mean? I've always pictured Assassin's Creed as, at least at that time, as very story-driven, single-player experience, telling a story of history through a different angle. I didn't think of it as, oh, we're going to run around. There's going to be like 8 of us. There's going to be 2 teams. We're going to be hiding in bushes and we're actually going to be assassinating each other. It's just like, no, just no.
Yeah.
Some people enjoyed it and that's them. And I just didn't.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I'm admittedly much more of a single player experienced person myself. I very much love a good story mode over a multiplayer experience. And I think, to me, like, the biggest thing with Assassin's Creed is that you feel, at least with those earlier games, that, you know, your stealth approach is against these enemies that are completely unaware of your presence. And to me, that was, you know, part of the fun of Assassin's Creed. And you immediately remove that from the scenario with these multiplayer games where you can still get the drop on your opponents, but they know that they're playing a game and that they're on guard at all times. So I think it's a little bit different of an experience, not one that I ever really got into, but like you said, I know that there is an audience out there that really loved those multiplayer experiences with Assassin's Creed. And so for those people, I'm excited that we will be getting some sort of a return here.
Yeah, definitely. It had its own little unique little niche, and every niche sometimes deserves a little bit of a reward.
For sure. But Isaac, yeah, I think overall this was, you know, it was interesting to kind of see where they're heading with this franchise. A lot of the most exciting things for sure are at least a couple years away. We've got Mirage in the last chapter sort of on the nearer horizon. But you know, anything that you are particularly excited about from here? What was the biggest takeaway?
The biggest takeaway is that they are still working hard. It seems like they're going to try and merge the old school player, the player that loved the old school, with the player that loves the new school. So that's kind of the biggest takeaway, considering they announced Mirage as kind of one style, and then Code Red is definitely going to be of the other style. But I think the big takeaway is we're finally getting feudal Japan, guys. Holy crap!
Yep. So it would seem. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for coming back to the show, for joining me here in season 3. You were somewhat of a mainstay in season 2 of the podcast, so it's great to have you back on an early episode, and I'm sure that I'll be bugging you to come back again later on.
Well, thanks for having me back, and you can bug me anytime.
Anything that you are currently working on, you want to plug? I keep seeing your Mass Effect playthroughs pop up. Is that still going on?
Yep, I still have to edit parts 4 through 7 of my Mass Effect 2 run. Those will be getting posted on YouTube probably within the next couple of weeks here. I might get one of those up today if I'm lucky, depending on how fast I can get it rendered and uploaded and YouTube not being slow. I'm actually planning on starting my Mass Effect 3 run on the day this is being recorded. So I will be doing that this afternoon, hopefully after a few attempts at getting Vex Mythoclast on Destiny 2, and then we're gonna kind of keep going from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you are watching or listening to this episode of the podcast, we'll definitely have all of Isaac's links in the description. We'll have his channel linked on YouTube, so check that out. Definitely some good content there from Isaac. Always glad to have you here, buddy. We'll see you next time.
Sounds great.
So there you have it. A lot of announcements to get excited about for gamers of all tastes. Don't forget to rate, review, or like, comment, subscribe, as every little action helps the show grow and improve. If you missed it, check out the review for Pearl, the horror prequel to X, released just 6 months after the first movie. The YouTube audience will also be excited to hear that the next Pokemon Challenge video will be released this coming Saturday, the 24th. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. Thank you again to Richard, Isaac, and Aaron for talking games with me today, and for generally just being great people. And thank you to you for joining us on episode 302 of Waiting in the Sky. I hope you'll stick around for more.